Hello guys, Mr. Bruce here. Today's book is a Dr. Seuss, Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose. But before we start, eyes watching, ears listening, voices quiet, and body calm. Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose. Up on Lake Winnebago, far at the northern shore, lives a huge herd of moose, about 60 or more. And they all go around in a big happy bunch, looking for nice tender moose moss to munch. Up at Lake Winnebago one day, they were lunching, just strolling along, enjoying their munching, for the moose moss that day was especially fine. When it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a bingle bug sitting, the bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road on such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" "Oh, of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use. There's room there to spare, and I'm happy to share, but I might be my guest, and I hope that you're comfortable there." So the bingle bug picked out a nice, easy seat, and the moose went on looking for moss moose to eat. Well, an hour or so later, the bug heard a squeak. He heard the small voice of a tree spider speak, and he said, "I say, you've got such a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly. He has such a nice face. If I got on too, do you think he would mind?" "Oh, hop aboard," said the bug, "and I think that you'll find the moose won't object. He's the big-hearted kind." "I accept," said the spider with joy and delight, and he started a web on the horn to his right. While the spider was spinning, he heard a gay song. A fresh little zinazoo bird came along. He stopped, he stared, he chirped, "Well, well, well. What a smart place to build. What a great place to dwell. I've been living in trees ever since I was born, but here's something new. Why not live on a horn? If there's room there for two, there's room there for three." "Oh, there's plenty of room," laughed the bug, "and it's free." Well, Thidwick stopped walking. What was all that talking? These guests had caught Thidwick, the moose, unawares. "Hey," he called out, "what goes on there upstairs?" "Just building a nest, sir," the zinazoo said, and began yanking hair out of poor Thidwick's head. And he plucked out exactly 204. "Don't worry," he laughed, "you can grow many more." He dozed off to sleep in his fine moose hairnet. "This bird," said Thidwick, "he's sort of a pest. But I'm a good sport, and I'll just let him rest, for a host above all must be nice to his guest." Besides, now it's getting quite late in the day. Surely tomorrow they'll all go away. But alas, the next morning, the sun's early light brought to Thidwick's sad eyes a most unwelcome sight. "Meet my wife," said the bird. "I was married last night. Oh, my goodness. Perhaps, by the way, I should mention to you that your uncle is coming to live with us, too. You're a very fine host here, and I knew that you would be willing." Then the uncle showed up, a woodpecker, and he started right in drilling. All Thidwick's friends shouted, "Get out! Get rid of those pests!" "I would, but I can't," sobbed poor Thidwick. "They're guests." "Guests indeed," his friends answered, and all of them frowned. "If those are your guests, we don't want you around. You can stay with us, 'cause you're just not our source." And then they all turned their backs and walked out with a snort. Now the big friendless moose walked alone and forlorn, with 4 great big woodpecker holes in his horn. "What holes?" whispered Herman, a squirrel who spied him. "What holes to hide nuts in? Mind if I tried 'em?" "Oh, they're yours," said the woodpecker. "Get right inside 'em. This big-hearted moose runs a public hotel, Bring your nuts, bring your wife, bring your children as well. So the whole squirrel family jumped in pell-mell. Now he's got squirrels living in his head. And the very next thing that the poor animal knew, a bobcat and turtle were living there too. Now what was that big-hearted moose going to do? Well, what would you do if it happened to you? You couldn't say scat, because that wouldn't be right. You couldn't yell scram, that isn't polite. A host that put up with a lot of kinds of pests, for a host above all must be nice to his guest. So you try hard to smile, and you try to look sweet, and you go right on looking for moose moss to eat. But now it was winter, and that wasn't easy. For moose moss gets scarce when the weather gets freezy. The food was soon gone on the cold northern shore of Lake Winnebago. There just was no more. And all Thidwick's friends swam away in a bunch to the south of the lake, where there's moose moss to munch. He watched the herd leaving, and then Thidwick knew he'd starve if he stayed here. He'd have to go too. Well, he stepped in the water. Oh, what a fuss. Stop, screamed guests. You can't do this to us. These horns are our home, and you've got no right to take our home to that far distant lake. Be fair, Thidwick begged, with a lump in his throat. We are fair, said the bug. We'll decide by a vote. All those in favor of going say aye. All those in favor of staying said nay. Aye, shouted Thidwick. But when he was done, nay, they all yelled. He lost 11-1. We win, screamed the guests, by a very large score, and poor starving Thidwick climbed back to the shore. Do you know what the moose pest did? They asked in some more. Oh no. Well, they asked in a fox who jumped from the trees, and they asked in some mice, and they asked in some fleas, and they asked a big bear, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 yellow and black bees. When poor Thidwick sat down with a groan to his knees, and then came something that made his heart freeze. Bang, bang! Bullets came zinging in past Thidwick's face. Guns were banging all over the place. Get that moose! Get that moose! Thidwick heard a voice call. Fire again and again! Shoot straight, one and all. We must get his head for the Harvard Club wall. That doesn't surprise me. Well, Thidwick took to his heels with that load on his head. 500 pounds on his horns. The moose fled. He could have run faster without all those pests, but a host above all must be nice to his guest. Up canyon, off cliff, over wild rocky trail with bullets bang bouncing around him like hail. Up gully, through gulch, down slippery sluice, with his hard-hearted guest raced a soft-hearted moose. Well, they finally had him, because those pests he'd run out of luck. Because of those guests on his horn, he was stuck. He gasped. He felt faint. The whole world grew fuzzy. Thidwick was finished completely. Or was he? Finished? Not Thidwick, decidedly not. It's true he was in a most terrible spot, but now he remembered a thing he'd forgot, a wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and the horns of all deer. Today was that day. Thidwick happened to know that old horns fall off so new ones can grow. And he called to the pest on his horns as he threw them. You want my horns? Now you're quite welcome to them. Keep them, they're yours. As for me, I shall take myself to the far distant side of this lake. And he swam Winnebago, and he found his old bunch and arrived just in time for a wonderful lunch. At the south of the lake, there was moose moss to munch. His old horns today are where you knew they would be, and his guests are still on them, all stuffed as they should be. The end. Well, that moose was in for a surprise, wasn't he? He let one little ant on the side of his horns, and everybody else jumped on. But he outsmarted them, didn't he? All right, I'll be back tomorrow with another book. Until then, be good to your folks and wash your hands. Bye-bye.